The world's second largest island isn't up for sale. That was the response given to Donald Trump in 2019, when he made the odd suggestion of buying Greenland from Denmark. But what most people don't know is that this is hardly the first time America has tried. For over 150 years, the US has toyed with the idea of buying Greenland, only to drop it for a few decades, then pick it up again. In this video, we'll look at why the US has wanted to snap up this mostly empty island of ice and snow, and the reasons that it's never been able to do so. The first serious consideration of taking Greenland for the United States was made in 1867, and was deeply connected to the US's purchase of Alaska. Secretary of State William H. Seward led the effort to acquire the vast Alaskan territory, despite confusion and mockery from the public and press. The attempt to buy what seemed to be a vast empty land with little to offer, except polar bears, was described as Seward's Folly. Acquiring Alaska fit with America's manifest destiny ideal, and opened more ports on the Pacific, but it was also a strategic move against the British in Canada. In 1867, the US still considered the British to be a potential threat. As a piece of the British Empire, Canada was a serious security concern, especially since the US was still emerging from the chaos of the Civil War. Robert K. Walker, former Secretary of the Treasury, and one of the leading negotiators in the acquisition of Alaska, described Canada as being created, quote, in a spirit of bitter hostility to the United States. Before we continue, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark. With so much of our communication and interactions taking place over the internet, it's more important than ever to protect your privacy and stay safe online. Luckily, Surfshark ensures that my data is safe and secure, behind powerful encryption that hides my true IP. Additionally, Surfshark allows me to access content on platforms like Netflix that would otherwise be region-locked. By simply changing my virtual location, I can use Surfshark to access films and TV shows that aren't available where I am. Other Surfshark features like CleanWeb also block ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, so you can browse safely. And tools like Alternative ID prevent your personal information from falling into the hands of data brokers, and minimize the possibility of spam and annoying marketing emails. Surfshark has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Support our channel today by clicking our link in the description, or visit surfshark.com/NolegiaVPN to get 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. As far as Walker and Seward were concerned, purchasing Alaska would outflank the British in Canada, and the other component of that plan was Greenland. Walker was a staunch advocate of the US opening negotiations with Denmark to complete the encirclement of Canada in the east, as well as the west. Walker's team put together a detailed report outlining the reasons for and advantages of a US purchase of Greenland. It offered ports that could support trade through the Northwest Passage, it had rich fisheries to feed the people, and a wealth of natural resources, especially coal and cryolite, a mineral that is essential to the smelting and production of aluminum. But ultimately, it was the security argument that Seward and Walker rested upon. But Walker and Seward had other ambitions, some of which ranked higher than Greenland, one of which was the Danish West Indies, including the islands of St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. But in 1868, Congress, which hadn't been overly eager for Seward's Alaska purchase anyway, shot down any further land purchases. This put a halt to Seward's other plans, including Greenland, and the idea was quietly dropped. However, a few months later, word of the plan leaked to Congress, where it was met with actual laughter from the congressman. Clearly, it was a non-starter. The whole escapade shut down the idea of buying Greenland for a few years. However, with the turn of the 20th century, it cropped up again. In 1910, the US ambassador to Denmark suggested a convoluted land exchange to resolve a Danish dispute with Germany. The US would trade the Philippine islands of Mindanao and Palawan for Greenland, which the Danes could then exchange with Germany for the disputed northern Schleswig region. The plan was never implemented, and was made irrelevant with territory changes after Versailles. Through the 1910s, the American Arctic explorer Robert E. Peary championed the idea of the US buying Greenland anyway. Peary believed that growing security threats on the eve of the First World War could best be met by buying Greenland. With the recent arrival of air travel, Peary suggested Greenland as a hub for transpolar aviation, and cited the same resource and mineral wealth that Seward and Walker had noted decades earlier. Peary launched a media campaign to drum up support, but it was met with a resounding shrug by the American people. The US was interested in buying lands from the Danes, but that land was the Danish West Indies. By 1916, with German submarine warfare threatening global trade, and a German plot to get Mexico to attack the US exposed, the US wanted to secure Central America. They negotiated with the Danes to acquire the islands of St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John, to secure the region and the valuable Panama Canal route. The agreement was finalized in 1916, and the islands were transferred in March 1917. An agreement came with a clear recognition of Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland. Secretary of State Robert Lansing declared that the government of the United States will not object to the Danish government extending their political and economic interests to the whole of Greenland. A pretty thorough no on buying it then. But the Second World War changed things. The rapid defeat of Denmark in 1940 thrust Greenland into the spotlight. As one of the last free Danish territories, it was symbolically important and at risk of a German invasion. For the first time, Washington considered Greenland to be a genuine strategic priority. The US had long adhered to the Monroe Doctrine, where it asserted the right to intervene anywhere in the Americas to prevent the expansion of European imperialism. It had been invoked multiple times, such as in the Spanish-American War, but it had always been oriented towards South or Central America. Now, for the first time, they invoked it in the North for Greenland. Fearing German intervention, the Americans signed the 1941 Denmark-United States Agreement for the defense of Greenland with the intact Danish government. It granted the US temporary control of the island's security until the end of the war. Greenland was perfectly positioned as a transatlantic refueling station. The island was of meteorological and maritime importance, being the best place from which to analyze and predict weather patterns in the Atlantic and Europe, which would affect trade and military operation. Most importantly, its cryolite reserves were vital to the resurging American war industry that was ramping up production at the time. It's no surprise then that, in 1946, the US offered to buy the island outright. At a meeting of the UN General Assembly, Secretary of State James Burns met with the Dutch Foreign Minister Gustav Rasmussen with a proposal to purchase the island for $100 million. The idea of buying Greenland in the 40s earned some popularity. A 1947 Time article entitled The Deep Freeze Defense argued that the Cold War wouldn't be fought over Europe, but over the Arctic. Therefore, Greenland was a necessity for any true defense of the United States. From Greenland, US bombers might deliver nuclear weapons onto Soviet soil, and it would be the first line of defense if the Reds came marching across the North Pole. The Danish government politely but firmly declined the offer. While we owe much to America, Rasmussen wrote, I do not feel we owe them the whole island of Greenland. Instead, the Danes arranged for the US to set up bases on the island, to achieve their strategic aims without handing over the whole thing. The US accepted and reached a final agreement on them in 1951. Those US bases, most notably at Thule, remain to this day. The Greenland issue fell by the wayside again for the next few decades. In 1979, the island was granted home rule by the Danish government, giving it virtual autonomy while Denmark managed its defense and foreign affairs. But the Greenland purchasing saga was suddenly revived by the unusual foreign policy of Donald Trump. In 2019, President Trump suggested the possibility of buying Greenland, citing the $700 million drain on Denmark's resources, and with assurance that it would be very nice and we're a big ally of Denmark. Trump made the first proposal for buying Greenland in 80 years. However, home rule meant Denmark couldn't sell Greenland, even if it wanted to. Greenland is not for sale, the Prime Minister said. Greenland is not Danish. Greenland belongs to Greenland. The Danish government dismissed the idea as an absurd discussion, which caused President Trump to cancel a planned visit to the country. But the diplomatic ripple soon smoothed out. Strange and unworkable as the idea was, we've seen that Trump's proposal had plenty of historical basis. It is thought that Russia's remilitarization of the Arctic and a narrowly avoided attempt by China's largest state-run construction company to secure airport contracts in Greenland were behind Trump's suggestion. That the Thule military base is also critical to the US's missile defense systems didn't hurt either. As always, it was concerns about US security that raised the Greenland issue once again.